In today's episode, Nancy and I explore another podcast that is exploring some of the topics that we have really enjoyed diving into. It's validating, confirming, and I think gets us fired up to keep digging, keep going, keep expanding. The podcast host, Steveo from Jackass, and Blink 180's Tom, singer, talk about the most incredible concepts that Nancy and I have addressed on our podcast. So today, in this episode, we explore and jump into what they have to say and what we have to say about it.
Welcome to Expansive Minds Podcast, Gateway to Freedom, a podcast where two friends, Aileen and Nancy, explore and expand beyond what they think they know in order to live a life of freedom. Thank you for joining us, and away we go.
Hello,
Hi, Nancy.
girlfriend.
It's nice to see you, as always.
And you. Happy spring. It's here.
Yeah.
It's here. It's here.
I know, lighter later.
Thank God. Yeah.
Right?
Thank God. Thank God.
Makes me want to go out and play kickball.
Yeah, no, I don't. That wasn't where I went, but
Kick the can, kickball, playing out in the field with the kids.
it's more like, I can be driving home at 6 and it's still light. Like,
Right.
I like
Isn't that
I like
nice?
it when it's light. The more light, the better.
I
Okay,
agree.
so we'll start with our affirmations and then launch into what the sinister mind has in store for us today. Okay. So we ask to be channels of love and light as we have discussions of non-duality, just concepts that we're putting out there to have fun with for our good, the good of all and the harm to none, and so it is.
So it is.
All right. So as usual, we never have a topic. And then I was in the booth actually doing some work. Doing some
when my
recording.
text came in?
When your text came in, and Aileen sends me this podcast, and she said, "This is pretty cool. Will you have time to watch it before podcast?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I should." So anyway, I was telling Aileen I was like a little bit out of sorts with things this morning, and we've mentioned our tools in our toolbox, and one of the things when I feel really out of balance and aligned and just icky, I was just feeling icky and like dark and not optimistic, which is just the antithesis of what I shoot for. And I was trying all my stuff, and I finally said I'm going to go in the Epsom salt tub. That's like a dam, like for me. So I'm in the tub, thinking she's got this really refreshing.
Oh, you were in the tub when you listened to it?
I was in the tub and I put on this podcast. And as I'm listening, it's like,
Mamma mia.
bleep and bleep and
Bleep meaning swearing.
curse this and curse that. Yeah, they didn't bleep it out. And it was the Jackass guy, the Steveo Jackasses, who I've only seen
Steveo
like clips
Jackass.
of their things. And I'm like, why does she have me watching
Why
a
did my
Jackass
beloved
video?
spiritual
How is this
girlfriend
good?
send this
Yeah. Well, ends up that Steveo, I mean, red flag right there, Steveo. But Steveo had Don, what's his name? What's the dude's name?
Tom. Blink 182.
Okay, Blink 182, which is a rock band I did not know.
Yeah.
Tom Delonge, who is apparently this very top tier CIA collaborative on aliens. So I'm like, oh, okay, we're going to talk about aliens. So we talked about aliens, bleep, 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 rock and roll style. But so I'll let you take it away and kind of give us a summary, and then I'll pipe in with some of the things that I thought were interesting.
Yeah. So the background of this is it was sent to me by someone I've known actually for a long time. So when he was a child, he was maybe 8 years old, I think, I'm guessing. His mom brought him to me because he was seeing dead people.
Oh, I did that with Ian. He's like, Mom, there's a dead soldier in the bathtub. I'm like, Aileen?
Yes, it was one of those. And it was a friend of their families who had died.
Oh.
So the mom brought him. So anyway, now he's in his early 20s. And he's married, and I said I officiated his wedding to his husband, and now they have a baby. So I was over there hanging out with him and the baby and their dogs, and then the husband came for lunch. So we're all hanging out, and they were talking about how they loved our podcast. And then they said, we have something cool. We would love to hear what you and Nancy have to say about it. It might be something good to talk about on your podcast. And I was like, great. So then he sent it to me last night, and then I sent it to you, and I was listening to it on the boat. Okay. And for anyone checking in, I go back and forth to Nantucket. So I was on the 1 hour boat from Nantucket to Hyannis. So I had my little earbuds in. So yeah, I was like, I sent it to you, but I mean, I just started listening to it, and then I sent it to you because I'm like, let's get on this thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it was so cool and refreshing in so many ways. So yes, as Nancy said, so we have our singer from Blink 182. We have our jackass, and Nancy's laughing. And for those of you that aren't familiar, yes, Blink 182 is a band, and Jackass, I've actually never seen any of their movies because I'm like, that is so dangerously crazy.
But ever you happen across clips sometime on YouTube, or my kids will have, my
Right,
boys
sure.
used to occasionally have something. I'm like, oh my God, no, not looking.
Right,
not looking.
right.
Yeah.
And I also want to say, I am having a mocha, and you know what happens to me, which is so weird? I always get a chocolate ring in my mouth. I mean,
no
ring?
chocolate, no.
Okay. It's the weirdest thing, I don't know.
I would tell you, I'm your friend.
You are
I would tell you. And there's no
But you have your glasses on?
I know. I can see the chocolate ring.
Okay, good.
I have this sixth sense when it comes to chocolate.
You have food on your face. You have food on your
not
face.
chocolate. Only chocolate.
Only chocolate?
I can,
It's not chocolate. There's chocolate
Yeah.
on it.
I'm
Anyway.
like a chocolate.
Oh, let's talk about chocolate.
Okay.
Good
We can do a whole show on chocolate.
Okay. So I'm watching it, You're in the bath watching it, apparently, trying to relax.
Trying to suck,
And yes,
suck,
they are.
suck the bad energies out of my system and calm down in an Epsom bathtub. And all of a sudden, F this, F that.
Right,
I'm like,
making
what
their
the
points,
heck?
man.
What is it? Yeah.
So both early 70s kids.
Yeah.
Now they're adults, obviously. Skaters. They both were into, skate.
Yeah.
Skateboarding,
were
things like that.
dudes.
So they had skateboarding language that they shared. So
Yes,
they were talking about how they were connected anyway.
Yeah.
And then it breaks into this whole like, how did that leap happen from Tom on his own, really interested in UFOs. So he does this whole like, going down some huge rabbit hole of getting documents and finding stuff, because I think, if you're committed to it, you can keep figuring out, follow this to breadcrumbs.
Yeah.
To get a lot of information that normally we're
now
too busy to find. We're too busy to find it.
He's like now to the point where such credibility or such accolades that he is like, they call him.
Right.
Like to go places, like the government calls him. Did he say something about he had to go to Italy?
He went to Sicily.
He had to go to Italy, because things were just
Blowing up,
lighting on fire. And he went over with CIA or whoever is in charge of the aliens, and they were like these laser beams blowing crap up in Italy.
So
and
that
ended up being, then they looked where it was coming from, and he says they have documents of
video
UFOs
pictures
over the water. So then they took a civilian, this guy says, they took a civilian helicopter to the water, and out of the water came a alien craft and shot the helicopter down, and one of the survivors of the helicopter, and they actually have some footage of it or something. So this guy, is
You're like, hey, don't you just sing songs?
Yeah, you're
I sing along with, but don't know the words for.
You're a rocker skateboard dude, but he's also like X-Files guy.
Super. It's like amazing. I mean, that's the thing is like, but we've talked before about the concept of woo-woo and being afraid to say, you're saying woo-woo, but it's like, what? It's all over the place. It's all over the place.
That did, excellent point.
Yeah.
Because that did give me some comfort, because when I started hearing what we were going to talk about, I'm like, don't people already know how weird I am? Do you have to keep flaunting it? Do you have to keep telling everybody how weird I am? Do we have to keep talking about it? But then I'm like, oh, these are cool dudes, and they're being weird.
Right.
Or weird.
It's not. I mean, maybe we can put the link somehow in this, so if people want to go see the podcast, they can.
Okay.
And just know if you have children or if your ears are delicate to, some swearing, just like know that. But so play it quietly if you have children around, because they're just like riffing, which I think makes it really cool too.
Yeah.
Really great. Just like look at you, and that's what they're doing. So Tom goes through and he finds all of these documents, and he's unfolding, and then
these are government documents.
Classified. And some classified, but also remember, the government hires companies and businesses to do their work. They're not like churning it out of the Pentagon. They have to hire. So he's jumping to all these places, these companies, these businesses, and tracking their emails and their documents that are public, but nobody can really find them because we're not looking for them. We're just like, oh man, chop wood, carry water. Like we got to pay our bills and go to work and feed our kids and go to sports things or whatever we're doing. So a lot of us don't have time to be doing that. So then it's sort of like word gets out. People are noticed. He's noticed for what he's doing, and he's putting this book together, and then he gets contacted. And they're like, how do you know this? And in some ways, there's then a confirmation when someone tracks you down and says, where did you get this information? You're like, you know what? If this wasn't plausible, you would not be contacting me. You wouldn't care.
Yeah.
And then he also brought up, I thought, a really brilliant comment about how some information that was leaked was false information. It's remember propaganda. You and I have talked before about propaganda and agendas, and so he talks about how it was leaked that these alien crafts hit like a meteor, and then they came to the Earth. And what he jumps to, which I think is phenomenal, and I love this. I'm like, oh, this is juicy. He talks about how UFOs are not from other planets, but they're interdimensional.
Which I think our previous show was,
Like it's like, in dimensions. And so I have an interesting interdimensional thing that happened to me regarding an alien interdimensional stuff. So this was so interesting.
You just happen to have an
interdimensional
experience.
Yep.
Okay.
So I was, I don't know why, I was standing in front of this full-length mirror, and I had some new, I don't know, I had an outfit on that I was taking a picture of. I was going to send it to my sister or whatever. So I'm standing there, and I just do a couple of like beep, 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 beep. I never know what to look at when you're doing like a selfie with a mirror, and I'm always like, like I don't even know what's happening. I'm like, oh, this is terrible. So anyway, so I'm standing still, and I'm like snapping it, doing a couple in a row, like looking up here, looking up here, so I can send one that looks like I'm looking at the camera. So as I'm looking at them, there was probably 6, I would say. Okay. And like there's me. I'm like, what is that gold round thing? It caught my eye because I don't typically wear jewelry. Yeah. Sometimes I do, but it's kind of rare. I love it, but I never wear it. So I look, and there's this big round gold thing it looks like it's on my finger like a ring. And I'm like, what is that? It's only in one picture. So it's like, no, yes, no. So I'm like, what is that? And I go, well, skeptic. It could just be a blip in the camera, the lighting, the camera, whatever. And then I'm like, this is kind of weird though. It's gold. It absolutely looks like a ring. It's absolutely like right here. So I show John, my partner John, and he looks, he's like, that's weird. And he zoomed in and he said, that is casting a shadow on your hand.
Oh, wow. Oh, just got the chills.
Yeah. So it was like about this, sort of like it looked like a big circular gold. Yeah. And it was casting, and I hadn't noticed, and then he showed me, and I'm like, oh my God, it's casting a shadow. So it wasn't a funky, like just weird glitch and the camera opening and whatever. It was like, no, there is a shadow. And I sent it to some friends of mine, and they're like, oh, interesting. And it totally had this feeling that it was like, as weird as it sounds, but not based on what Tom was talking about in this podcast. So, I mean, when I looked at it, it just felt to me like, boop, this thing's moving through, minding its own business. And then I caught it, and it was like, whoa, and just like booked it out. Now, according to what Tom says, I'm like, he's talking about kind of exactly that, where these interdimensional beings can come in and out. We've talked about timelines.
Big time,
come
yeah.
in and out of dimensions. So what he's saying in this podcast is that he has evidence, and he's working with governments globally, that these are interdimensional beings and not from other planets. And he talks a lot about, in this podcast, about creating, we've talked about quantum physics, that we're making it happen, observer effect, all of that. The thing I loved at the end of the podcast, he talks about energy, doing energy medicine, doing energy work, and how they had a bunch of mice that they gave cancer cells to, and they'd done it before, so they knew it was a 27-day span of buildup of cancer, and then the mice would be dead. And then they had this specialist that was supposed to come, an energy medicine person, like I was supposed to come and do it, but they were sick, they couldn't come.
Come and heal the mice.
To come and heal the mice, to see if it worked. Does it work? Does it not work? Come and heal the mice. And then that person couldn't come, and so they just said to the assistant, to the person's assistant, like, you can do it. And the person was like, this isn't my specialty. This isn't my thing. And they're like, you can do it. Just give it an intention. Give it a prayer, right? The way we talk about prayer, like focus.
Yes.
Not begging, but like empowered.
Yes.
And so it took, I think in the podcast, Tom said like 22 days. And all of a sudden, bam. Not only did those mice that the assistant, the person, was working on be healed of cancer. Remember they said that they took blood, the healed blood, and put it in cancer-ridden mice, and then healed them. Yeah. And then this whole thing with like a cotton ball. Do you remember that?
Something about they put cancer cells on it.
No, I thought it was healing energy.
They healed the cotton ball and then shipped it off to the rats and the
yes,
and
they healed them. Right.
Craziness.
And then the interesting thing about, the interesting thing too about our old Steveo, who was like, woo, jackass, like, and I was like, oh, please don't do this for adolescents to then copy you. However, he talks about being on drugs. Yeah. He's sober now, so you and I said before everything started rolling, Dark Night of the Soul, right? Yeah. He talks about how he did all these drugs, and they were interested, like, what drugs put you in that state, and how he was able to see things, but it was like not good, because you can't be in control of it, which is, I've said before, I think in the 60s and 70s, we had to break out of the rigid 50s. And what happened was people were jumping on board like, oh, tune out, like, Timothy Leary, everybody, Kerouac, Ginsberg, the beatniks, all that, the original beatniks, not the ones that got like so rebellious, but they were all like, hey, smoke weed, like stop the rigidity. The point was to try to break out of the reality that was so rigid that we were co-creating, right? But it went too far. And that's, I've said before, a lot of my concerns about drug use for spiritual stuff is kind of what Steve O is saying, that like, if you just get there through drugs, you don't know that you can get there through the meditation, through the work. Like, and then it's also an excuse, like maybe it is real, maybe it isn't real. It's like, oh, you got it. So that's why, I mean, we did a huge surge in the 60s and 70s, but we couldn't maintain it. We couldn't get to the age of Aquarius. I mean, whatever, we can talk about like galaxies and stuff and planets, but we couldn't maintain it because it was brought upon by drugs, and therefore people weren't going in and out themselves in full control. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Oh my God.
Over to you, Nancy. Over to you. I'm gonna sip my coffee.
And I have so many. Okay, so I guess I'll work backward. Talk about the drug thing first. So we were reading. You brought the book last time. Whole Brain Living, which that neurologist was saying the right quadrant, a hemisphere in the right quadrant, one of the four. She's got 4 parts of the brain, and what she called character 4. That quadrant of the brain has a direct connection with things that we don't know. There's functions of that brain that they don't know what the heck it's doing, and so the idea is that is the divine tap into source. So these drugs, when you take these mind-altering drugs, they're breaking down the barriers that allow the communication within reason to those higher connections, and the communication is limited for a reason so that we don't think we're going insane.
Exactly.
Or we don't get more than we can handle.
Well said.
And that's where the meditation comes in. Little by little, you open those up. So he did it with the drugs, and I believe Tom said it's like you do meditation to tune into the radio station of God, but when he did the drugs, he tuned into every radio station all at once. It was like, ah! And so, yes, so that was, he stopped it. And now, proud of him, he's been meditating daily, 40 minutes a day for 900 days or something. He was very proud of that. And I'm like, yeah, I got you beat, dude, but good for you. Okay, so yeah, that was Steveo, drugs. Then let me dial back to the information that Tom found, that somebody approached him and said, hey, where'd you get this? He is claiming that, so the government is now acknowledging that there are unidentified flying objects, and like out and out, like for years they haven't, and they're acknowledging it. And this guy Tom says it's because of his work.
Right.
So maybe, right? So one little rock star can change the world.
And his passion to explore the world.
Yeah. So there was that. There was the drug thing. There was another component I wanted to. Yes, the interdimensionality makes more sense than traveling to a planet. It doesn't mean that like aliens, extraterrestrials, there still could be traveling interdimensionally from another galaxy, so they still could be aliens. But the disconcerting part that one of the gentlemen who's like me, oh, but they're here to help us. Like they first made an appearance when we started messing around with nuclear war, and they were like, can't have you messing up the planet. It's not that it messes up the planet, it messes up the frequencies of the dimensionality. So they didn't want. So one of the gentlemen on the podcast said, "So yeah, they're trying to help us." And Tom's like, "Not necessarily." So that was kind of a bummer to me that he was. But then they didn't backpedal. But then he said, "Well, there are all kinds of aliens or beings, and they all must have different intentions." But yeah, I wasn't crazy about. What do you think about that when he was like, "Well, there is a belief construct that perhaps they don't want us to get too powerful." And then they went down some crazy path of there are aliens that feed off of emotions, because emotions are energetic, and that this was a Star Trek episode that they feed off of fear. And so they want you to be scared, because then they want to like consume that frequency, that energy that was generated from fear. I don't know. What do you think of that?
Yeah, so a couple different things. One, I do believe that when you have someone who rises into power, let's say like, Hitler or dictator who's causing genocide and a lot of issues, absolutely, the more anger and fear that's directed at them, the more they're like, oh, yummy, 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 yummy. But like attracts like. So just as we talk about feeding and meditating and put love out to raise the vibration, to heal people, the opposite is true. Yeah. So Tom did talk a lot about the dualities.
Yes.
And that you have to have both. The both just exist.
Yes, to expand. Because if you only have positivity, like Esther says, if you don't have contrast, you're dead.
Yes, right, because we're here to experience this.
So dualities.
Right. What I took from that, which I actually thought was really cool, because I tied it into a couple of things. There's this maybe religious or spiritual or both concept that, God comes through us, or God created us to be able to feel we're human so that we can have a human experience, which involves emotions.
And free will, yeah.
Now, that to me, when he talked about are they AIs, artificial intelligence, he does bring up a lot of artificial intelligence concepts. And his point being not that unsimilar to the concept of, or dissimilar, whatever word I'm trying to say there, to the concept of some being, some energy enjoying our human experience to touch, to smell, to have this sensory life, which includes emotions. So to say that some interdimensional being or artificial intelligence or something, entities are channeling through or enjoying a synergy, or us as vehicles to experience fear or love or all that, is not that far-fetched from this whole God wants to know himself, herself by coming through and having relationships and all that. So I took that as, similar concepts, because that's what I like to do. I like to see the common threads.
Yes.
Right? And I'm like, everybody's coming at it differently from a different perspective. However, is there something that's the same? And then I take that same little nugget, and that's what I might use.
Yeah.
So that was, I wasn't that disconcerted because it was so similar.
Okay. Well, that's cool.
So yes, I just loved listening. And we haven't brought this up yet. I thought you were going to bring it up. I was like, I'll bring it up. The God part, the love part. So that was so key. Both Tom and Steveo both agreed of the importance of high vibration, love vibration, the light, like all of that was such an agreement. And Steveo talked about Conversations with God, the book.
The
Donald,
book Conversations with God, yes. And I think
and
Tom
was not familiar
familiar
with
with that. Yeah.
Yet they were talking about the same concept. So I love, and I feel bad, I don't know the name of the other gentleman that was there who was also part of the conversation.
Is he a jackass too?
He was, Nancy, that seems a little harsh. I mean, you should rewatch our podcast on judgments.
Okay,
no, just kidding.
I
don't know if he was.
Not going to judge idiots who jump into lions' den.
That was fake.
Fun.
Oh, but you heard that. That was fake.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't fake. Well, whatever.
Anyway,
yeah.
okay.
So what I loved was this shared concept that all three of them had.
About
that
God.
The inquiry, even into skepticism, even into controversy, even into conspiracy, even into hidden truth, like they all were sort of like, well, this is cool, let's check into this. And Steveo talked about the book he read on
The Conversations with God book.
no, Pleiadians.
Oh, yes! Thank you for reminding me.
Right.
Yes.
I thought of you.
Steveo is reading books about Pleiadians,
Yes.
ancient alien civilization. I have the Arcturian books. For some, I'm drawn to the Arcturian stuff.
And talking about DNA and what are we really
Something
made
about
of. I thought you would love
10%.
that part.
I love that part.
I
Yes.
thought you would.
Something about doctors can only figure out what 10% of our DNA does. Like,
Right, according to that author.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then one of those was like, well, then doctors are, the other 90% is junk, but other researchers are like, no, it's just stuff that you don't know yet. And
the concept was that maybe because perhaps we could cause so much damage to the intergalactic, planetary, that
some of the
we
stuff
were not, it was unplugged.
Yeah. Now, would also then lead us to the current, like Cryon says, this is what's happening, as do the astrologists, Pam Gregory,
Mm-hmm.
that the DNA is flipping on.
Right.
That some of those dormant strands are now becoming active, and whether it has to do with the flood of energy we're getting in the planet that we've never had astrologically before.
Human resonance.
Yeah, or whether it's time that this shift is upon us. And so yes, more of those DNA strands are becoming activated. I love it.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So the love piece and the high vibration,
Yes.
I think is important. I also really liked that Tom talked about the things we've talked about people using religions and creating religions to separate. And he really kept stressing having this information and being able to talk about it and being in transparency with it. It's like, let's not make it about this figurehead and this figure, like Allah, Buddha, like let's not make it about all of these individual concepts and egos. let's make it about this life force
Yes.
that's such a high vibration and pull us together, not separate us. So I
Yes.
thought that was a
Yes.
great point.
Yes. He said it doesn't matter what you call it. It is that unifying source that is perfection. And so since perfection can't evolve, instead of devolving, God did kind of offshoots of himself in us to let us kind of go explore while he still holds that top frequency. And we get to go back to it when we are done exploring.
And I love too that the difference of, we got to see the two different things. And one of the podcasts you and I talked about where you do like to sit and meditate and have stillness. You were talking about stillness. And then I said, well, not everybody has to have stillness. And so Steveo, for him, the meditation, the stillness was really important for him to connect. And then it sounded like for Tom, he was like, nope, just live a meditative life.
Yeah, that would be the Eckhart thing, which is the walking meditation, or or mindfulness.
It's just that, and everybody does it differently. So I think I love that that was represented. And I also really appreciated how much Tom, they were both listening to each other. Actually, all three were listening to each other. I thought it role modeled so much what we need right now.
Yeah. These
three men are listening to each other and asking really beautiful questions. Not like we get stuck with these, wow, defensive-y, prove it to me questions. They were all together. What do you think about this? What do you think about this?
And the respect of listening. Yes.
The respect and like, okay, that's cool. What do you think about this? Open-minded, growing together, expanding together, really listening. And there was no like, when Tom said that for him having a meditative life, and then Steveo saying, I really need to meditate. And Tom's like, I absolutely respect that. And I understand that. And that's great for you.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. No. It was encouraging, to say the least. And I want to look up the gentleman's book.
Yes. So Tom has written a book.
So he has a show called, a website. We have a show. he has a website called To the Stars. And then,
it's Tom's website. And he's
book.
in this podcast, he made it clear, he really wants to share information and inspire and encourage people to go on their journeys of inquiry, right? Is that what I kind of got that vibe.
And the book is called Secret Machines. And he's got two of them, I guess. There's like Secret Machines 1, Chasing Shadows, and Secret Machines 2, A Fire Within. And he spells secret S-E-K-R-E-T.
Oh, interesting.
So it doesn't look like it's on Kindle, which is a bummer because I love my Kindle. But I might look into that because it sounds like that's going to be full of stories of things he's uncovered. Maybe he'll share some of the documents. And
Right. He said he has these pieces from from crafts that we don't have here that are familiar. So he's like, if I have these little ones, imagine there's got to be big ones. But he talks a lot about Area 51. Did he did he write a book about, or he was supporting the book of?
There might be references to that in that secrets book. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. But again, now from that I take hope, because I'm all about the technology. Because I've heard experts say we are 100 years behind where we should be because technology has been suppressed. And so if this stuff's starting to come out, maybe some of the technology.
It's already sitting in warehouses, places, right?
Yeah. Damn it, I could be teleporting to Italy in a second.
And that's that power piece. So I guess who really is creating this lack of power amongst us?
Yeah, this is true. So we should wrap it up. I probably sum up real quick. What do you think? So what we like to do is what we talked about, and is there any way we can, as we move through our day, use this to our advantage?
I would say don't think you're crazy.
Don't
think you're crazy.
And stay open-minded.
There's so much going on right now that if you think you've transported to a different timeline,
you did.
Or you right. If you think this little gold thing is casting a shadow on your finger and you can see it, it is. So, and to find the friends, find the friends.
Find your tribe.
Who can talk about it and explore with it. And, You know, you could be magically, wildly surprised if it's like, you know, a rock star and an old jackass.
Love it. So have fun with it. And as always,
More to be revealed.
Thank you for joining us on Expansive Minds podcast, Gateway to Freedom. Until next time, more to be revealed.